Severance Season 2, Episode 8 Recap and Review. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. For the first time since I've been writing about Severance, I have to say I have mixed feelings. Season 2, Episode 8, which has the peculiar title Sweet Vitriol, is an odd bottle episode, hot on the heels of last week's bottle episode. 2 bottles in a row is a tough sell in even the best show, and taking this much time away from the main story is an odd creative choice. Spoilers ahead. This was not a bad episode, by any means. But the big revelation at the very end leaves me feeling unsettled, and not in a good way. Not in a, ooh, cool twist way. In my spoiler-free review of the second season I wrote, first off, I do feel differently on the second watch. I like last week's Gemma, Deacon Lockman, episode a great deal the second time around, and I think that's because I watched both these episodes back-to-back originally, and it was odd to have 2 episodes totally detached from the main story of Mark, Adam Scott, and the rest of the MBR crew in a row. I still think that's a bit odd in terms of structuring the season, but my second viewing of last week's episode hit me in the feels more than the first time around. My second viewing of tonight's episode made me appreciate the dreamlike nature of Harmony Coble's, Patricia Arquette, visit to her hometown of Salt's Neck. Side note, I'm not sure where this is supposed to be in the fiction, but right away I thought, this looks like Newfoundland. And on my second viewing I thought, this looks like the Bonavista area of Newfoundland. And apparently that is where it was filmed. I visited Newfoundland and spent some time in Bonavista in 2019, and it's truly a fascinating, beautiful, otherworldly place. There were no glaciers floating by when I visited, but it was in October rather than the dead of winter. In any case, I do find Harmony's odyssey compelling. Returning to a Lumen Company town that was once thriving thanks to the local Lumen ether mill, only to find it dying, its people, older, and more frail, as Coble puts it, reveals a great deal about Lumen's past. The town is sick. Many of its inhabitants are ether addicts now. Almost all of them are deeply anti-Lumen. Only one remains loyal to Lumen, Harmony's aunt, Sissy, who lives alone on a rocky peninsula outside of town. We learn that she still lives by the 9, which makes her a pariah in the community. We also learn that Ms. Huang, Sarah Bach, is not the only child employed by Lumen. When Harmony stops by a cafe to speak with an old friend, Hampton, James Legros, we learn that both of them once worked in the ether mill as children. Child labor is very much one of Lumen's many insidious practices. There's another connection to Ms. Huang here. When Coble was young, she was also a Wintertide Fellow. Earlier in the season, Mr. Milchick, Trammell Tillman, says to Ms. Huang, "You cannot graduate from this fellowship until I have deemed you Wintertide material." It appears that Lumen youth deemed to have a great deal of potential are offered a special track with this Wintertide Fellowship, though the details of it and the rest of the child labor force remain fuzzy. Coble returns to her childhood home with the help of Hampton, a man who now peddles ether to the local addicts, who hides her in the back of his truck in case Lumen has people watching the house. This sounds paranoid, but we learn that Mr. Drummond, Olafur Dario Lafson, has phoned Sissy, and at the end of the episode a vehicle approaches as Coble speeds away. Hampton stays back apparently to hold them off. "Tame these tempers," he says grimly as the headlights approach. We learn a few things at Coble's childhood home. First, that her mother died after a long illness once she was taken off her life support machine. Coble blames Sissy for this, telling her she would have taken care of her mother if she hadn't been away from school. "I didn't even get to say goodbye," she tells Sissy, a mixture of grief and rage warring inside her. Or perhaps a more apt phrasing, woe and malice.